you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock. This is Bruce McGuire.
And Maxwell Powers.
This is Altered History 2. How would we know? So we talked about in our previous podcast on Altered History, we discussed the mud flood and many altered history, altered timeline scenarios. But the main problem with a lot of these, despite the evidence, we talked about buildings and the lower level floors, evidence of a mud flood, some strangeness with when the pyramids were built, then they were possibly reassembled in the 1700s, possibly a great worldwide flood could have happened as recent as 200-300 years ago. So the main problem is, even with all this evidence, how would we know for sure?
Yeah. So how would we know for sure?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough. The only thing I could really think of is the Vatican archives. So the Vatican archives have all these secret books and written histories, and you're not allowed to take anything out. And you have to be some kind of a special official just to schedule an appointment and your watch to look at anything for a small period of time. And then I'm sure there's sections of it that nobody's ever allowed to see, except maybe one or two of the highest ranking officials. And I don't know how far you want to go deep into this conspiracy, but some people even think that extraterrestrials or Anunnaki or Nephilim or Watchers or whoever controls the world and is pulling the strings for the New World Order, if they're the ones that they oversee the archive as well. So there's certain aspects of it that probably wouldn't even be in the archive, and only they know. So it's kind of like a matrix situation with what if there's multiple layers of the matrix? Did those overseers, did they safeguard this, whereas they have the current version of history, which Napoleon said history is nothing but a pack of lies agreed upon. And speaking of Napoleon, it's kind of weird because even there's a whole bunch of inconsistencies with Napoleon's entire history, the Napoleonic Wars, what really happened, Great Tartaria, the lost, forgotten empire, and the remnants of Tartaria, which we talked about briefly in the previous podcast. If there's safeguarding levels or gatekeeping levels, what if the secrets in the Vatican archives are kind of just another layer of lies that's possibly slightly more true, but still not true? How would we ever know that? What do you think, Maxwell?
I have no idea, but I haven't heard New World Order in a long time.
Well, we talked about this before, the old world order, whatever happened before the Great Flood. And if we tie that into, we'll have a dedicated podcast on the ages of man. But during the Golden Age, according to the Greek mythology, that was during Titan rule. And during the rule of the Titans, before the gods conquered them or vanquished them.
Is the great, when you say the Great Flood, is that the same as the Moses thing?
You mean Noah?
Noah.
You got to get your biblical figures correct.
Yeah.
Yes, the Great Flood usually refers to the flood that Noah.
Okay. So it's one and the same. Okay, got it.
So most people theorize that the Great Flood mentioned in all of mythology from every single ancient civilization, it's all the same flood. And the dates range anywhere between 8,000 and 13,000 years ago. Those are the most common dates. But other theorists suggest there could have been multiple floods, and some of them could have been recent, like a recent global flood, which resulted in mud residue. So it's called the mud flood. There's plenty of channels.
I remember you mentioning that. That's funny.
There's quite a few channels on YouTube that research this extensively, and they're pretty good. Philip Druzadin, you have Wise Up, and a couple other ones.
What other artifacts besides the mud flood thing? Has there been artifacts that kind of has changed the way?
Of course, I mean there's the Baghdad Battery where ancient civilizations had working electricity. I mean, you have the Egyptian.
Oh yeah.
You have the Egyptian hieroglyphs with the helicopters, submarines, and all that stuff. You have the South American.
I remember.
cultures.
I remember. I saw like a I don't know if it was a documentary, but they saw what might have been a computer on a ship or something, on a sunken ship, like a computer.
There's been a whole bunch Yeah, there was a lot of weird things. I mean, again, we talk about dating, carbon dating, and a bunch of different aging processes. I'm not willing to make the leap of faith and trust that that technology is within the range of error that the scientists claim. Because how would you know with 100% certainty that if they date something to even 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, I don't see any way to corroborate that. Because what if in another 100 years they're like, oh yeah, that was actually way off. It's only like 100 years old. Because there's a lot of new research coming out now with fossilization where you could have different types of fossilization or petrification within 20, 30 years. I mean, once again, I'm not going to say that's 100% true, but there's these studies that suggest it's possible. They claim it's possible. So if we don't know what the real truth is, I mean, everything's kind of just an assumption or a belief. So again, it's very difficult to date anything with certainty because there's too much missing information. It's like I mentioned this in one of the true crime podcasts, like even DNA research, DNA testing is now under fire. I think New York State either passed a bill or proposed a bill to invalidate DNA testing for criminal cases because even when you get a 99% match, that's only 99%. And the more they look at it, they're like, well, they were getting different results different times, and they're not 100% sure the test is as accurate as they're claiming. So it could really be closer to like 70% or whatever. I don't know what the real numbers are. But the bill certainly cast doubt on the scientific certainty of even DNA testing. And this was in New York State.
That's very interesting because I saw there's actually an organization that fights for like DNA testing, and they let out a lot of
Yeah.
uh, people in
Innocent
prison,
people, yeah.
like in the hundreds now. Like,
Well, it's almost like we're going to get really controversial now, but it's almost like the HIV test. If you take it 10 times, you'll get different results. And a lot of people don't like talking about this. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's a conspiracy, but the guy that won the Nobel Peace Prize for chemistry for his polymerase chain reaction test, the PCR test that actually is the basis for HIV testing, he said himself that he doesn't believe HIV leads to AIDS. It's just it's a bunch of nonsense. And this is the guy that created the process by which it's tested.
what? When did he say that?
He's been saying it all through the 90s. I forget the exact year that he won the Nobel Prize. I don't
So
remember the year.
he won the Nobel Prize for that, and then he went against it.
He didn't go against PCR testing. He said it's not going to determine. He said that there's no proof. It doesn't determine whether someone has AIDS. It
Very
doesn't work.
interesting.
It doesn't work the way that other people are claiming that it works. He said so. He believes it's all a grand conspiracy. Big pharma, all these money making drugs. Like someone who tests positive for HIV or AIDS or whatnot, they obviously have some kind of an issue with their immune system, but it's not necessarily like the actual. It might be a made up.
Huh.
There's an issue with the immune system, but it's not what the mainstream scientific community claims it is, which, again, all the cognitive dissonant sheep are going to be up in arms about it, but all you have to do is look at the 40s and the way, again, the scientific community treated even smoking cigarettes. 1 in 5 doctors were recommending certain brands of cigarettes and saying there are no detrimental effects to smoking. That was the mainstream position. You have the same
Yeah.
thing with vaccines. That's where the appeal to popularity logical fallacy comes into play, and the appeal to authority fallacy. Just because someone's a doctor or a scientist doesn't mean they automatically know the truth. And just because there's a consensus among these peers, that's a problem with peer review. If all these people have the wrong information or they're operating on assumptions, but they don't realize it, their cognitive dissonance and dogmatic biases, they'll agree with each other, just like they all agreed that cigarette smoking wasn't harmful, or the majority agreed in the 70s that we'd be facing a global cooling crisis. And yet there was a couple different claims. They switched from global cooling to global warming once there was no cooling. Now there's been no warming, so they have to just say climate change because they're all wrong all the time, and people still
They
trust
have to be more vague and shit.
Yeah, and anything to pass more taxes and fees for the lobbyists. So that's where the phrase "follow the money" comes from. And of course, it's weird. Like the conspiracy deniers, the people that don't believe that rich politicians would lie to serve corporate interests. They don't believe that, but they'll have to trust the bought and paid for scientists that are in cahoots with the lobbyists. They'll buy anything they say and pretend it's science. But once again, I'm not claiming one way or another on anything. Maybe the
Yeah.
world is getting warmer, but maybe it's not. Like everybody's got their subjective experience depending on where in the world they're living. So certain areas of the world might be getting cooler, other areas might be getting warmer, and then they play all these games with the ice shelf, Antarctica. The ice is melting faster than before, but then NASA also reports that the ice is forming faster than before too.
Huh.
So then you have, well, what's the net difference? So now you're getting into all these highly politicized and shady reporting. So it's like you can't trust anything, obviously, because all these people have their biases. So
Hmm.
defaulting to follow the money is a pretty good position, right?
Huh. For fighting conspiracies, you mean?
Well, just for finding the truth. So, I mean, where I went to with that little aside was just that the conspiracy deniers call the skeptical, they call the skeptics conspiracy theorists, like with the negative connotation that you should just buy whatever the people in authority tell you and don't question it, regardless of what it is. All vaccines work and are safe enough. Or, back once again, back in the 40s, cigarettes are safe or safe enough. Don't question it. Doctors recommend it, scientists approve. And then, with the sugar industry, the same thing happened. Like, sugar is safe for kids. Well, not really. If you look at all these scientific studies, sugar is like more toxic than alcohol or nicotine. It wreaks a lot of damage.
I was thinking about what you said. I mean, it's a pretty good what do you call that when you say follow the money? What do you call that? A phrase or like a saying? What do you call that?
You can even call it a motto, I guess, for a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a bad thing to follow, but I think I would I would follow it up with who has the monopoly on the use of force,
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's another way to say it.
because big that which is pretty much the states or statism and government. So
One of the
because
funniest, one of the funniest.
because following the money, because money is a when you use money, it's a voluntary exchange, but it can be corrupted if force is used or
Or like
bit,
fiat currency.
well, that kind of thing. And I don't, I just want to put evil in the structure of money, because because it's not accurate. Because
Correct.
money is neutral. It's a medium of exchange.
Well,
And if
like you said, unless it's
if force is not
artificially,
in the mix.
if it's artificially manipulated and not backed by gold or something like Bitcoin.
Yeah,
If it's not finite, and if it can be fluctuated and inflated or manipulated, then it's not really honest. So it kind of, if it's not backed or legitimate, then it is kind of evil by design, because then that was the intention.
yeah,
So anyway, we got way off base, but
yeah,
with proving that history didn't happen the way that it happened, it's tough to do, because these institutions have a very vested interest in maintaining status quo and their power. We talked about this before too. If they just suddenly announce the truth, whatever the truth is, if it's radically different, everybody's like, well, why haven't they been teaching this? Oh, they knew this the whole time and they're keeping this from everybody? It's pretty strange. So I actually started this whole thing with the carbon dating and peer review and science in general. If you look at the past 100 years of science, I mean, even more, I guess, it's become so politicized, everybody's kind of forgotten about the scientific method.
yeah,
Observable, measurable, repeatable. And when you throw out the window and just put in the word trust and faith in scientists without, like, and you could trust, but what happened to verify? And if you can't verify, then a scientific so-called fact is really nothing but belief if you can't verify. If you can't
right,
verify it for yourself or somehow through an independent, neutral third party in whatever way. So if
Right.
Egyptologists are the only ones allowed to examine these artifacts or the pyramids, it's tough. It's tough. So if there was a mud flood, if there was a greater Tartaria that was the old world order, that was the actually my original point before we got off track was the golden age of man, which was under the rule of the Titans in Greek mythology. And
Huh.
so this was before the gods vanquished the Titans or unseated the Titans from power. If this was the old world order and this was a global civilization and human beings were allowed to achieve their full potential, we could put it that way. Because there's architecture. It's weird. If you go to look at some of these, even in Indonesia, you have some of these government buildings that are pretty old and they have the exact same architectural style as Great Britain or even American cities or European cities. I mean, even in some of the Asian cities, like it's very strange how there's a worldwide architecture that existed all this time ago. And we talked about what happened. The theory is that the survivors of the flood or whoever, they found these cities and they claim to have built the architecture, so they built smaller buildings in the same architectural style because they couldn't build the bigger ones because they didn't have the technology. They didn't have cranes big enough. Like there are these single pieces of stone. It's unbroken stone. They weigh so many tons. There are no modern cranes that can lift them, or at least maybe until now. Like right now, maybe the technology is catching up. But 100, 200, 300 years ago, when they're claimed to have been built, the other problem is with all these older paintings. Like you have these old paintings with these cities already built, or like the biggest buildings were already built in the background earlier than they were claimed to have been built. And if they took 100 years of construction, like modern scholars, mainstream scholars,
Wait, what city was that? The
I mean, we
building.
could talk about cathedrals, certain royal palaces all over Europe. They were claimed to have taken quite a long time to build, and there's paintings from that time period with it already fully built in the background, either earlier dates than they were supposed to have been built, or during the middle of its alleged construction, and you can see it was already built. So there's a lot that doesn't add up with the official mainstream version of history all over the world.
That's interesting. I want to see those paintings.
And how would we ever know? That's what's tough. Like there's a whole bunch of strangeness going on with almost every civilization. The Roman Empire. There's people claiming the Roman Empire never even really existed, and they're using one lie to cover up another lie. And then, of course, the
Wait. Like, I thought it just existed like more recently.
well,
I thought that was the
there's
claim.
different theories. Some people claim they never really existed, and it was actually something else, and they intentionally built this other narrative to cover up a different narrative.
Oh, so like all the characters in there were never like they were
Well,
all
they
made
might
up.
have.
You mean?
I don't know. They might have been real. It's tough because if you narrow down the sources, if it's all the same one or two sources, what's to stop someone have made up that story? And then, of course, the victors write the history books. We can't forget that. So it's so difficult to know what the real truth really is.
Hmm. True.
Very, very difficult.
Huh.
But what I was actually going to mention,
That's interesting. Like, I mean, the most recent one that I like, at least in this lifetime, that I've experienced like changing, or like in my eyes, Pluto used to be
a planet.
a planet, yeah, but now it's not, or whatever.
Well,
And
that
also,
was didn't they go? I believe they went back and forth on that several times.
oh, really? How about the I think Columbus, like discovering? Do they still teach that,
I'm
or
not.
was it?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they teach it like as a general. They're like, yeah, I discovered. But then if you look at the even way back in the day, if you look at the if you go deeper, even the official government text, I think they call it he discovered the Americas. Because even though he never landed on the mainland of the United States, they give him credit because he made it through the Caribbean while looking for India passage to India. Like it, there's a lot
But
of strange.
also, wasn't it also recent as far as like the annihilation of the Native Americans, like the
The real
the
truth
the
coming to
death
light. I
camp.
mean, there
Yeah,
were
wasn't that like more recent? Because I remember for some reason like it wasn't
there were
like when I was
kernels
in when I,
there were kernels of truth forever. I mean, you could always find like alternative books. I mean, it's tough to find, and they're definitely in the
but
minority. But
but
there's older
what I mean
texts
I
that
think
talk about
it seems like it's more mainstream now. Like I think I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe I should ask some kids, but it seems like mainstream now that everyone knows that they killed a lot of like most of the Native Americans here.
Well, I mean, even when I was a kid, I remember the blankets with smallpox stories. That I don't think that was secret. I mean, how far
Hmm.
back are you looking? If you're talking about like 50 to 100
I,
years ago.
I'm talking about like late '80s. Like I don't think I don't remember.
You might be right. I think I mean you might be right. It might have taken until the 90s.
Hmm. I should look into that. Maybe it took that long. Maybe like
I mean, I also do. I remember seeing documentaries from the 70s going over this stuff too, though. So I'm not. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, you're probably right. It wasn't mainstream. It was like fringe. Like the truth was fringe. But isn't the truth always fringe?
yeah.
Speaking of the Native Americans, I mean, if we're going down that route, like there's some weird theories out there. Like there's even theories. I mean, there's theories connecting certain Native American tribes to the empire, the lost empire of Tartaria. Like they have some similar clothing and pictures, some similar symbolism. I mean, and these symbols are also like some of them are found in Buddhism as well. There's reoccurring.
Can you give the background on that tribe that you talked about? What is it called? Tartara.
The Greater Tartaria was the empire.
Oh yeah. Can you? Because I forget.
We went over this on the first episode on Altered History 1. You don't remember?
No.
Come on, Maxwell, you got to pay attention. Basically, it could there's maps from the past couple hundred years. I mean, there's maps that show the Greater Tartaria region. It's like a gigantic empire where Russia is now, but even bigger. And yeah, there's maps. There's even flags. They found some like old U.S. history textbooks with Tartaria in it.
Damn.
Yeah, there's definitely evidence that was not completely wiped out. That's why for this podcast we're talking about how can it be proven. Like all these little pieces of evidence,
Hmm.
they definitely meet the
Maybe
criteria for
maybe it could be fringe now, but with like the internet, maybe it might become mainstream in like 15, 20 years.
it. Probably yeah, it might. I mean, people with the internet kind of changed everything. With the internet now, people are discovering all sorts of things that were covered up or hidden. But what I was saying with the Native Americans, some of these theories are that there were actually Africans, and there's there's a lot of weird, again, very difficult to corroborate for sure. But there's photographs from even 200 years ago that are showing strange things. Let's put it that way. There's quite a bit to investigate. But yeah, some if they were kind of like the remnants of Atlantis before the flood.
Hmm.
So what do you think about that? I mean, even Atlantis, I think it's being taken more seriously now than before because of I mean, even the lost city of Troy. That's a famous one where all of the kind of the mainstream sheep that usually go, oh, it's a myth, it can't be true. So like the discovery of Troy really shut up a lot of people, but now it's kind of like going back in a circle. Oh well,
And before that, it was a myth. Like people thought it was a myth.
yeah, people thought it was just the myth. Helen of Troy and the whole Troy myth was just Greek mythology. What's
Oh shit!
it's
I didn't know
always
that.
it's always strange to me that people like what's to stop people thousands of years from now who have a vastly different they'll have a vastly different life whether humanity gets wiped out by a flood all over again, they start all over. If some of these oral stories or even written stories from America or even from anywhere in the modern world, they might think it's mythology. If their lifestyle, if their way of life is so different from ours, like if they don't have cars or planes and all of technology started from scratch again, and they have like horses, they're starting all over again, they're going to think everything that we wrote down is mythology.
Huh, that's interesting. And then
So,
like let's say like 30, 40, 100 feet, or maybe a mile up of like mud covers the whole technology which exists today. They could start all over again for another like 2,000 years, and they would have another like history
yeah,
onto themselves from those who survived or whatever.
absolutely. Yep. And
That's crazy. And then they start digging like a mile deep down, and then discover airplanes and fucking cars and shit.
how do you know? How do you know we didn't do that with UFOs and all these other things?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
that's a possibility too. Yeah.
because if this has already happened multiple times, how do we know that's not happening now? And if certain people know about it, what could be some possible motivations to cover it up? Because if free energy existed, always existed, you can't really
Mm,
control people as much, right? Because
yeah.
it's such a big
I,
moneymaker, and control and power are kind of like timeless. Like in the Middle
yeah.
Ages, kings wanted to control everything. If the Middle
Yeah,
Ages were
I'm
real.
really fascinated with the free energy, and especially Nikola Tesla. He's awesome. He's we should do a podcast on him.
I mean, there's all sorts of theories out there. Yeah, of course, we need a Nikola Tesla series, but there's even theories out there that say that he never existed.
Get out of here, Nikola.
Yeah, yeah.
Never existed.
I haven't really researched that in depth to know how much veracity there is to those claims, but it's just
Wow,
interesting because
that's interesting. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I mean, photographs. I mean, you're saying that they staged a photograph of Nikola
but how do
Tesla
you know it was
with.
Nikola Tesla? You know what I mean? Like if someone
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like you can make up a whole story of Nikola Tesla based on photographs of another person, and just make up this myth that he invented all this stuff. And are these theorists like kind of like saying that the technology was alien or something, and then Nikola Tesla was kind of
I didn't, like
invent.
I said, I didn't look too deeply into it. I don't really remember what the motivation was behind it, but it's an interesting point. I mean, some people say the same thing about a lot of
I
people.
could, yeah, I could see that, like where like I could see how some theorists would say, these are the technology of electricity is from aliens, and they had to make up Nikola Tesla so nobody would panic about aliens, giving us technology or something like that.
Yeah, it's so hard to know what the real truth is. Very, very difficult. There's some good evidence in like flags, like medieval flags and emblems, where you can kind of trace a lot of the symbols to see if they got it from an older place. It's just kind of interesting. Like some people say that Tartaria, the emblem was a dragon. So then you have lions slaying dragons a lot, and that's where slaying the dragon came from. It was like the Tartaria was kind of like the old world order or the remnants of the old world order. I mean, there's so many strange photographs and paintings that show advanced technology, like free energy, electricity poles. Martin Lightke actually has a lot of these photographs on his YouTube channel. It's pretty interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And some of these, like he finds them in like the Library of Congress, the National Museum, National Photography Archives. Like they're legitimate official sources where he finds these photographs.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's very, very interesting. The true age of photography he goes into, because do we know that? I mean, like this is kind of like the Mindshock motto. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. Like whether we're looking at true crime cases, paranormal, or just even
Wait, so
history.
I'm curious about the photography. When was it really invented, or when was the first photograph taken?
I think we went over this on
What did we?
yeah, on several podcasts.
Hmm. 1600s? I don't remember.
Yeah, so there was the different types of photography. So the official inventor is credited as being Thomas Wedgwood in 1800.
Hmm.
But there were older techniques. There's even, like, just from the Wikipedia, Aristotle and Euclid described pinhole cameras, and this is the 5th and 4th centuries BC. In the 6th century CE, Byzantine mathematician Anthemius of Tralles used camera obscura in experiments. Han Chinese polymath Shen Kuo, who lived 1031 to 1095, and Arab physicist Ibn al-Haytham, who lived between 965 and 1040, independently invented the camera obscura and the pinhole camera. Albertus Magnus, who lived between 1193 and 1280, discovered silver nitrate. And George Fabricius, 1516 to 1571, discovered silver chloride. So they had like these older types of cameras. We're talking possibly 1,000 years ago.
That's interesting.
So I think modern film using a light-sensitive substance, paper or leather treated with silver nitrate is credited to Thomas Wedgwood in 1800. But there were a lot of different techniques. So there's a whole bunch of different methods. And if history was rewritten, they could have had cameras of a different style too. If that technology was lost, we don't know. So we kind of went roundabout a little bit, and then we finished the same way we started. How can we ever really know if history was altered? Like, what proof would be sufficient? What do you got?
Well, it would be I don't know, it would be evident, I guess. Like I don't know, aliens coming down and landing on the land and just saying hi to everybody, and then saying to us that, oh yeah, or your airplane came from us or something. I don't know. Or your electricity, Nikola Tesla was a fake, and we invented electricity, and we taught you how to do electricity, and here you go. Oh, by the way, this is how we fly around in a saucer. If you guys want to fly around in a saucer.
That's still, I mean, how much of that would really prove, like, I'm talking about completely altered timelines, though. Like, if Tartaria existed, they wiped it out, stole its technology, or wiped out its technology, whatever it was. You know what really bothers me? Sometimes I think about this. If technology leads to the ruin of man, then reintroducing technology would be a bad thing, right? You'd have to live without digital or any kind of advanced technology, kind of like the Amish or the Native Americans. If technology inevitably leads to the fall of man, it's kind of weird, right?
Wait, who said that? That leads to the fall of man?
I'm just saying, if it does, that's just a theory.
I mean, it could lead to the fall of man, or it could bring us to prosperity. I don't know.
Like a golden age.
I see how the technology can be the fall of man, as far as AI, taking over and decides to kill us. But that's a good topic, by the way. AI and Terminator type.
Singularity. We did that podcast.
Oh, we did.
Maxwell Powers, always on the ball.
Yeah, I love that topic. We should do another one.
Yeah, we might revisit. But in the next episode of this series, we'll go into more specific examples, specific evidence, Tartaria, and a lot of interesting finds that kind of shake the foundation of the normal, accepted history. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You could also check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
And Maxwell Powers.
Take care, guys.